She or he has to plus verb. He has to win. He has to talk. He has to sell. She has to fail. He has to ask. He has to fix it. He has to play. She has to fail. He has to reply. He has to lose. He has to hide. She has to win. He has to start. She has to eat. She has to run. She has to call. He has to read. She has to give. He has to think. He has to paint. She has to help. He has to care. He has to hate. He has to delay. She has to help. She has to end. He has to learn. She has to lose. She has to help. She has to write. She has to walk. She has to work. She has to cook. He has to begin. She has to lead. She has to sing. She has to wait. He has to learn. He has to drive. She has to plan. He has to study. He has to focus. He has to swim. He has to forget. She has to trust. She has to care. He has to sleep. He has to adapt. He has to travel. She has to listen. She has to clean. She has to buy it. He has to take it. He has to refuse. She has to obey. He has to follow. He has to create. She has to start. She has to learn. She has to teach. She has to finish. He has to imitate. He has to refuse. She has to finish. She has to serve. She has to follow. She has to teach. She has to serve. He has to accept. She has to break. She has to assist. She has to begin. He has to criticize. She has to forgive. He has to explain. She has to speak. She has to attend. She has to dance. She has to create. He has to oppose. She has to accept. He has to explore. He has to choose. She has to create. She has to decide. He has to practice. She has to dream. He has to support. He has to unlearn. She has to invent it. He has to oppose. She has to accept. He has to ignore it. He has to succeed. She has to avoid it. She has to believe. He has to interrupt. She has to explain. He has to improve. He has to exercise. She has to answer. She has to reject it. She has to explore. She has to support. She has to believe. He has to motivate. She has to trust me. She has to improve. He has to surrender. She has to compete. He has to apologize. She has to neglect it. He has to complete it. He has to understand. He has to overcome it. She has to remember. She has to complete it. She has to understand. She has to understand. He has to be respected. He has to procrastinate. She has to appreciate it. She has to challenge him. He has to be discouraged. She has to be encouraged. She has to be encouraged.